Don't move. Emily Carter froze with one hand buried between two of the Alpha King's black ceremonial coats and the other wrapped around a silver ring she had never seen before, yet somehow recognized. The voice had come from behind her. Low. Controlled. Far too close. 3 seconds earlier, she had been alone inside King Adrian Blackwood's private wardrobe, surrounded by cedarwood shelves, polished boots, dark wool, and the faint clean scent that seemed to cling to everything he owned. Now the bedroom door had opened nearly 2 hours earlier than expected, and the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories was standing between her and the hallway. Emily's pulse struck hard against her ribs. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. If you believe that kindness is power, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us, love redeems the broken. Now back to Emily. She slowly withdrew her hand from the coats. Your Majesty. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Adrian did not answer. His attention had fallen to the object in her palm. The ring was heavy, old, and strangely warm despite having been hidden inside a cold wooden drawer. A black stone sat at its center, surrounded by a silver crest shaped like a crescent moon crossed by 3 narrow lines. Emily had found it by accident. She had been sent upstairs for the king's formal cloak after the council secretary assured the household staff that Adrian would remain in the eastern chamber until 4. It wasn't even 2:30. She had reached for the cloak, heard something tap against the back of the wardrobe, and discovered a narrow compartment behind the cedar panel. She should have closed it immediately. A maid did not investigate royal belongings. An Omega Maid certainly did not. But the instant Emily saw that crest, something inside her had gone still. She knew it. Not from the palace. Not from any book. From somewhere much older. A memory without a picture. A feeling without a name. Adrian stepped farther into the room. He wore no crown. Only a charcoal shirt beneath a fitted black coat. But nothing about him needed gold to announce authority. At 6'3", he seemed to reduce the size of every room he entered. Emily had seen noble alphas lower their eyes when he passed. She had watched guards straighten before he spoke. Yet he wasn't looking at her like a servant who had been caught somewhere forbidden. He was looking at the ring. Where did you get that? Emily swallowed. It was inside the wardrobe, Your Majesty. Where? Behind the cedar panel. His expression changed so slightly another person might have missed it. Emily didn't. She had survived 3 years in royal service by noticing the things powerful people believed servants were too invisible to see. The king's shoulders became rigid. His breathing stopped for half a beat. Then his silver-gray eyes lifted to hers. You opened the compartment? I didn't know it was there. That wasn't my question. Heat climbed into Emily's face. Yes. Silence filled the room. Somewhere beyond the tall windows, carriage wheels rattled across the palace courtyard. A clock ticked on the mantel. Emily became painfully aware of the maid's uniform against her skin, the plain gray dress, the white apron, the small Omega service pin at her collar. She imagined Margaret Hale's face when she learned what had happened. Dismissal would be merciful. Emily placed the ring carefully on the nearest shelf. I'm sorry. I was sent for your ceremonial cloak. I heard something fall, and Adrian's gaze snapped toward her hand. Emily stopped. What? She whispered. He took one step closer, then stopped himself. His eyes were no longer on the ring. They were fixed just below Emily's collar, where the movement of her arm had pulled the fabric slightly aside. Instinctively, she covered the spot. Beneath her fingers lay the pale crescent-shaped mark she had hidden since childhood. Adrian went completely still. Emily had never seen stillness look dangerous before. Not dangerous to her, exactly. More like the stillness of a man who had spent years searching for an answer and suddenly feared the answer was standing 6 feet away. Who gave you permission to wear that mark? He asked. Confusion overcame fear. Permission? Answer me. Emily's spine straightened. Despite herself, no one gave me permission. I was born with it. Something flashed across Adrian's face. Disbelief first, then recognition, then an emotion she could not read at all. He turned toward the bedroom entrance. Emily's stomach dropped. He was going to summon the guards. Instead, Adrian reached for the door and closed it with a quiet click. Emily stared at him. The king kept one hand on the handle, but rather than blocking her path, he stepped deliberately to the side, leaving the doorway clear. Then he looked from the ancient ring to the mark beneath Emily's trembling fingers. When he spoke again, The authority in his voice had disappeared, replaced by something quieter, something almost impossible. "Emily," King Adrian Blackwood said, using her name for the first time. "Who was your mother?" Emily could not answer him, not because she was hiding anything, but because the truth had always been painfully simple. She did not know. Her fingers remained pressed over the pale crescent mark beneath her collar as King Adrian waited beside the closed door. "I never knew my mother," she finally said. The words sounded strangely fragile in a room built for a king. Adrian's expression did not soften, but something in his eyes shifted. "Your father?" Emily shook her head. "I never knew him either." For most of her life, those answers had been enough to end conversations. People rarely cared where an unwanted Omega came from. Emily had been found as an infant outside a church near a small mountain town in western Montana, wrapped in a faded blue blanket with no family name, no pack insignia, and no letter explaining who had left her there. The woman who raised her, Ruth Carter, had given Emily her last name and a home above a little bakery that smelled every morning of cinnamon, coffee, and warm bread. Ruth had never been wealthy. She had never been powerful. But she had taught Emily how to polish silver without leaving fingerprints, how to mend a torn hem so neatly no one could find the seam, and how to remain kind when kindness was not returned. When Ruth died, Emily was 19 and alone again. Royal household service had seemed like safety. The palace offered wages, meals, and a narrow room beneath the servants' wing where nobody asked questions about her past. For years later, Emily had become very good at disappearing. She woke before sunrise, pinned her brown hair into the same simple knot, fastened the gray Omega service pin beneath her collar, and began working while most of the palace still slept. She knew which floorboards creaked outside the West Gallery. She knew Margaret Hale wanted breakfast tea at exactly 6:15. She knew Captain Marcus Reed took his coffee black and always thanked whichever servant handed it to him. She knew which noble guests left their rooms looking as though a storm had passed through and which ones folded their napkins before leaving breakfast. Most importantly, she knew where she did not belong. The royal wing was one of those places. King Adrian's private wardrobe was another. "How long have you worked here?" Adrian asked. 4 years this November." His brow tightened. 4 years. Emily could not tell why that troubled him. Until today, she had doubted he even knew her name. She had served at dinners where he sat less than 20 feet away without once looking toward the servants. At least, she had believed he never looked. "And no one has ever asked about that mark?" he said. Emily lowered her hand. "People have asked." She hesitated. "I learned not to answer." Adrian's gaze settled on her face. "Why?" A memory surfaced before she could stop it. She was 12, standing behind the bakery while 3 older girls stared at the crescent near her collar. Strange, one had called it. Another had asked whether it meant Emily belonged to some disgraced pack. Ruth had found her afterward trying to cover the mark with powder. That evening, Ruth had washed the powder away with a warm cloth and told her never to be ashamed of something simply because other people did not understand it. Emily looked toward the wardrobe now. Questions usually become rumors. And rumors become judgments, Adrian said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. For one brief moment, he did not seem like the distant ruler whose arrival could silence an entire hall. He seemed like someone who understood exactly what she meant. Then footsteps sounded outside the room. Emily recognized Margaret's brisk pace immediately. "Your Majesty?" Margaret called through the door. "I was told you returned early. Emily Carter was sent to retrieve your cloak. She appears to be missing." Emily closed her eyes. Of course she was. Adrian looked at the door, then at Emily, then at the silver ring resting between them. "She is here," he said. Silence followed outside. Emily could almost picture Margaret turning pale. "Is there a problem, Your Majesty?" Adrian did not answer immediately. He crossed to the wardrobe and picked up the ring, turning the black stone beneath the afternoon light. Then his attention returned to Emily's hidden mark. "No," he said at last. "Miss Carter has done nothing wrong." Emily stared at him. Nobody with power had ever protected her reputation before she asked. Margaret murmured an acknowledgement and withdrew, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Emily released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Why did you say that?" Adrian turned the ring once more between his fingers. "Because it is true." Then he stepped toward the cedar panel Emily had accidentally opened and pressed his thumb against a nearly invisible carving in the wood. A second compartment released with a soft click. Inside lay an old photograph, its edges faded with age. Adrian removed it carefully and held it where Emily could see. A young woman stood beneath a snow-covered pine tree, smiling toward the camera. Around her neck was a pendant bearing the same crescent symbol Emily had carried on her skin since birth. Emily forgot how to breathe. Adrian watched her face rather than the photograph. Her name was Eleanor, he said. And 23 years ago, she disappeared. Emily stared at the photograph until the room around her seemed to lose its edges. 23 years. The number settled somewhere deep inside her, heavy enough to make her fingers curl against her apron. She was 23. Who was she? Emily asked. Adrian lowered the photograph slightly, but his eyes remained on her. Someone this kingdom owes more than most people know. That was not an answer, and they both knew it. Emily looked again at the young woman beneath the snow-covered pine. Eleanor had light brown hair falling past her shoulders and a quiet smile that felt strangely familiar. It was not enough to prove anything. A matching symbol could be coincidence. A date could be coincidence. Even the strange ache behind Emily's ribs could be nothing more than hope trying to turn itself into certainty. She had learned long ago not to trust hope too quickly. You think she was my mother? Adrian's jaw tightened. I think we should be careful about what we believe before we have proof. The restraint surprised her. Kings, in Emily's experience, did not need to be careful with words. Everyone else adjusted around them. Adrian placed the photograph beside the silver ring. But yes, he added quietly, I think it is possible. A clock chimed somewhere beyond the royal wing. 3 measured notes. Emily suddenly remembered the cloak. The council. Margaret waiting downstairs. The ordinary world had continued moving while hers had quietly tilted. I should go. Adrian nodded once. No command to stay. No demand for answers she did not have. He opened the door himself. Emily stepped into the corridor, expecting relief. Instead, she felt his attention follow her until she turned the corner. By the time she reached the servants' staircase, Margaret Hale was waiting with both hands folded tightly at her waist. Emily. One word. That was all Margaret needed. I can explain. I sincerely hope so. Emily opened her mouth, then remembered the photograph. The ring. Adrian's careful silence. I was retrieving the ceremonial cloak when His Majesty returned. Margaret studied her for several seconds. And he said I had done nothing wrong. Margaret's expression became unreadable. Yes, I heard him. She took the folded cloak from Emily's arms. Return to the West dining room. Lady Vanessa Whitmore arrives in 40 minutes. Emily nodded and hurried downstairs. Work was easier than questions. Silverware needed aligning. Crystal glasses needed polishing. White roses needed trimming precisely enough that no petal touched the candles. Emily let routine carry her forward. Yet every few minutes, she saw Eleanor's face again. By 4 o'clock, the palace had transformed. Guards stood beneath the stone archway. Staff lined the entrance hall. Outside, 3 black automobiles rolled along the half-mile drive toward the palace steps. Vanessa Whitmore emerged from the first wearing an ivory coat and the effortless confidence of someone who had never entered a room wondering whether she belonged there. Her family controlled several prosperous territories in the West, and court gossip had spent months predicting that Adrian would eventually choose her as Luna. Emily lowered her gaze as Vanessa passed. Tea in the blue parlor, Margaret instructed. 10 minutes later, Emily entered carrying a silver tray. Adrian stood beside the tall windows while Vanessa spoke about the upcoming moon selection. He looked exactly as he always did in public, composed, distant, impossible to read. Emily almost wondered whether the conversation upstairs had happened at all. She approached the table. Your tea, Your Majesty. Adrian turned. The instant his eyes met hers, something changed. Not in his face. In the room. Emily felt it as a faint pressure beneath her ribs, warm and startling, like hearing a distant note that somehow belonged to a song she had forgotten. Adrian's fingers tightened around the back of a chair. Emily nearly missed the cup. Vanessa did not. Careful, she said, amusement sharpening her voice. Royal china is probably worth more than a servant earns in a year. Emily steadied the saucer. Yes, my lady. She set it down perfectly. Adrian had gone silent. Emily could feel his gaze even after she stepped away. She reached the doorway before curiosity defeated good sense and glanced back. He was still watching her. Not her uniform. Not the tray. Her. Vanessa followed his line of sight, and her pleasant expression cooled. Emily left immediately, her heartbeat accelerating as she crossed the hall. Behind her, Vanessa resumed speaking, but Adrian barely heard a word. His wolf, silent through years of ceremonies, alliances, and carefully presented noble women, had awakened the moment Emily entered the room. And for the first time in his reign, the Alpha King was afraid of what it seemed to recognize. By 5:30, Emily had almost convinced herself that the moment in the blue parlor meant nothing. Almost. She carried that fragile certainty into the West dining room, where 40 guests would soon gather beneath crystal chandeliers for Vanessa Whitmore's formal welcome dinner. The room smelled of white roses, polished oak, and the faint smoke of cedar from the fireplace. Emily concentrated on measurable things. 12 inches between each place setting. 2 forks to the left. 3 glasses above the knife. Details were safe. Details did not have missing mothers or ancient rings hidden behind cedar panels. Emily, the centerpiece is crooked. She turned quickly. Hannah Miller, the youngest maid on Margaret's staff, stood beside the table with panic written across her face. At 18, Hannah had been in palace service less than a month. "It looks straight to me," Emily whispered. Hannah pointed toward a silver vase. One white rose leaned farther than the others. Emily nearly smiled. "Then we have survived a terrible crisis." Hannah's shoulders relaxed. Emily adjusted the flower anyway. The first guests arrived minutes later. Noble families entered in dark suits and elegant gowns, their voices filling the room with conversations about alliances, estates, and the moon selection. Emily moved quietly among them with a water pitcher. She had learned that invisibility was easiest in crowded rooms. People looked through servants when they believed nothing important could possibly be wearing an apron. Vanessa entered last. Her ivory evening gown caught the chandelier light, and conversations softened as she crossed toward Adrian. Emily noticed the approving looks immediately. Vanessa looked like the future everyone had already chosen for him. Beautiful, confident, alpha-born. Emily lowered her eyes and continued pouring water. "There she is," a woman's voice said nearby. Emily knew without looking that the words were meant for her. "The maid from this afternoon." Another voice answered softly. Vanessa mentioned her. Emily moved to the next glass. An Omega servant in the royal wing alone. Imagine. The ambition. A quiet laugh followed. Emily kept pouring. The water remained steady despite the heat rising beneath her collar. She had heard worse. Rumors were only words until you gave them somewhere to live. At the far end of the table, Hannah approached with a tray of sparkling cider. Her hands were trembling. One guest shifted his chair backward without noticing her. Hannah tried to turn. The edge of her tray caught the chair. A glass tipped. Emily moved before she thought. She caught the glass with one hand and steadied the tray with the other, but a few drops splashed across the white tablecloth near Vanessa's place. Silence spread outward with remarkable speed. Hannah went pale. "I am so sorry." Emily saw Margaret approaching from the doorway. She also saw the fear in Hannah's eyes. One mistake during a royal dinner could send a new servant home before dessert. "It was me," Emily said. Hannah stared at her. "Emily, no, I bumped the tray." Vanessa turned slowly. Her gaze traveled from the damp cloth to Emily's plain gray uniform. "You seem to have difficulty knowing where you belong today." Several guests became very interested in their glasses. Emily felt every eye in the room, but she kept her shoulders straight. "I apologize, my lady. I will replace the cloth immediately." Vanessa smiled, though there was little warmth in it. Perhaps royal service requires more than good intentions. Emily reached for the nearest napkin. "Perhaps it does." The answer was respectful, but something about it made Vanessa's smile disappear. "Then perhaps Margaret should assign you somewhere less demanding." Emily heard Hannah inhale beside her. Before Emily could respond, a man's voice crossed the room. "That will not be necessary." Adrian had been standing near the fireplace with Marcus Reed. Emily had not realized he was watching. Now every guest turned toward him. Adrian approached the table without hurry. His gaze settled first on Hannah's trembling hands, then on the small splash of cider, then finally on Emily. "Miss Carter prevented a full tray from falling," he said. "That seems considerably more useful than pretending the accident never happened." Vanessa's expression tightened. "Of course. I only meant that standards should be maintained." "They should." Adrian looked toward Hannah. "Are you hurt?" "No, Your Majesty." Then there is no problem. He returned to Marcus as if the matter were finished. Conversation slowly resumed. Emily replaced the napkin and guided Hannah toward the service door. Why did you do that? Hannah whispered once they reached the hallway. Because you are new. You could have been dismissed. Emily gave her the smallest smile. So could you. Neither woman noticed Marcus standing several feet away until he spoke. Miss Carter. Emily turned. The captain held a sealed envelope bearing the royal crest. His Majesty asked that you receive this personally. Her stomach tightened. What is it? Marcus's expression revealed nothing. An assignment. Emily broke the seal only after he walked away. The message contained one sentence in Adrian's precise handwriting. Tomorrow morning, report to the royal wardrobe at 8 o'clock. Emily read it twice, then a third time. At the bottom, beneath the king's signature, someone had added 4 words that made her blood run cold. Come alone and tell no one. Emily slept for less than 3 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the royal crest stamped into the wax, then the 4 words beneath Adrian's signature. Come alone and tell no one. By 7:45 the next morning, she was climbing the narrow servants' staircase toward the royal wing with her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Morning light spilled through the tall windows, turning the stone floors pale gold. The palace was already awake below her, filled with breakfast carts, ringing telephones, opening doors, and the familiar rhythm of people beginning another ordinary day. Nothing about Emily's morning felt ordinary. She reached the upper corridor at 7:58. Captain Marcus Reed stood outside Adrian's chambers. You are early, he said. 2 minutes. For most people, that qualifies. Emily glanced toward the closed door. Is His Majesty inside? No. He left for an emergency council meeting 20 minutes ago. Her confusion must have shown because Marcus handed her a small brass key. His instructions were specific. You are to enter the wardrobe and retrieve the ceremonial cloak from the rear cabinet. Emily stared at the key. The same wardrobe. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Does His Majesty have another one I should know about? She almost smiled. Almost. No, Captain. He expects to return around 10. Marcus stepped aside. You have plenty of time. Emily unlocked the door and entered alone. The quiet felt different today. Yesterday, she had entered this room as a maid performing a routine task. Today, she knew a photograph of a missing woman named Eleanor existed behind one cedar panel, and a silver ring bearing the same crescent symbol as her birthmark had waited behind another. She crossed the bedroom and opened the wardrobe. Adrian's clothing hung in disciplined rows, dark coats to the left, formal jackets to the right, ceremonial pieces arranged by season. Emily found the rear cabinet and removed a long black cloak trimmed with silver embroidery. That should have been the end of it. Take the cloak downstairs. Return the key. Continue working. Instead, she heard a sound. Click. Emily stopped. It came from somewhere behind the cedar wall. She waited. Nothing. Then another soft click, followed by the faint scrape of wood. She looked toward the hidden compartment from yesterday. Do not, she whispered to herself. Curiosity had already caused enough trouble. Emily turned toward the door. 3 steps. Then the crescent mark beneath her collar suddenly warmed. She froze. It was not painful. It felt like standing near a fireplace after coming in from winter, a gentle heat spreading beneath her skin. Emily slowly turned back. The hidden panel stood open by less than an inch. She had not touched it. Her heartbeat quickened. She placed the cloak on a chair and approached. The compartment containing Eleanor's photograph was empty now, but another seam had appeared along the back wall. Emily pressed it lightly. A narrow drawer slid forward. Inside rested the silver ring. Why would he put you back here? She murmured. The black stone caught the morning light. Emily reached toward it, hesitated, then touched it with one fingertip. The room disappeared. Snow. Not palace snow seen safely through glass, but wind-driven snow sweeping across a dark road. Emily heard someone breathing hard. A woman was running beneath towering pine trees, clutching a bundle against her chest. Blue fabric. A baby's blanket. Emily could not see the woman's face, only brown hair whipping across the back of a dark coat. Almost there, the woman whispered. Just a little farther. Emily tried to move, but she had no body inside the memory. She was only watching. The woman reached an old wooden building with a small white cross above the door. A church. Her hands trembled as she pulled the silver ring from her finger. She tucked it beneath the blue blanket. The baby made a soft sound. The woman bent close. Emily. The name struck through the vision like a bell. If they ever find you, this will tell him who you are. Emily's breath caught. The woman looked over her shoulder. For one impossible second, her face turned toward Emily. Eleanor. Then everything vanished. Emily stumbled backward into the wardrobe shelf. Morning light returned. Cedar. Wool. Silence. The ring was no longer inside the drawer. It was clenched in her hand. Emily stared at it, breathing too quickly. That had not felt like imagination. She could still smell pine. She could still hear the woman's voice. Emily. Eleanor had known her name. A sound came from the bedroom. The outer door unlocking. Emily looked toward the clock on Adrian's mantel through the open wardrobe doors. 8:23. He was supposed to return at 10. Footsteps crossed the bedroom. Emily's fingers closed around the ring. Adrian appeared in the wardrobe entrance and stopped. His gaze dropped immediately to her hand, then to the open hidden drawer. Emily. She could barely make her voice work. I saw her. Every trace of royal composure vanished from his face. Who? Emily looked down at the ring. Eleanor. Adrian took one slow step toward her. Tell me exactly what happened. Emily raised her eyes to his. She was carrying a baby through the snow. Adrian went still, and she called that baby Emily. Adrian did not speak for several seconds. Emily could hear the mantel clock ticking beyond the wardrobe, each small sound suddenly too clear. His gaze moved from her face to the silver ring trapped inside her hand. What else did she say? He asked. Emily tried to steady her breathing. She said the ring would tell someone who I was. Adrian's eyes sharpened. Someone. Emily searched the memory, afraid that reaching for it too quickly might make it disappear. Snow against pine branches. Eleanor's trembling hands. The blue blanket. The little church beneath the white morning sky. She said, if they ever find you, this will tell him who you are. Adrian looked away. It was the first time Emily had seen him break eye contact because he needed to, rather than because he had finished a conversation. He repeated. You know who she meant. It was not a question. Adrian walked to the window and stood with his back to her. Morning sunlight outlined his shoulders. For a king known throughout the territories for being unreadable, his silence said too much. Your Majesty. Adrian. Emily blinked. He turned. In this room, for this conversation, call me Adrian. The request felt more unsettling than an order. Emily had spent 4 years measuring every word around people above her station. Now the Alpha King was deliberately removing one of the safest distances between them. You knew Eleanor, she said. Yes. How? Adrian looked toward the ring again. When I was 8 years old, Eleanor served my family. Emily's fingers tightened. As a maid. No. As something the court no longer remembers correctly. He crossed back toward the wardrobe but stopped several feet from her. Her bloodline were called keepers. Omegas with an unusual sensitivity to memory, emotion, and objects carrying strong bonds. They advised the royal family for generations. Emily looked at the ring. Memory through objects. Sometimes. Adrian's voice lowered. Most keepers could sense impressions. A place. A feeling. A voice. Eleanor could see moments with extraordinary clarity. The warmth beneath Emily's collar returned. And you think I can too. You just described a church you have never visited and a woman whose photograph you saw for the first time yesterday. Emily wanted to argue. She wanted an ordinary explanation, something small enough to fit inside the life she already understood. Instead, she asked, why did they disappear? Adrian's expression closed. That is the question I have been trying to answer for 15 years. 15 years. Emily remembered the photograph. Adrian would have been 16 when his search began. Why would a king spend 15 years searching for a servant? Because Eleanor was not merely a servant. The words came quickly, almost sharply. Then Adrian softened his tone. She protected people who never thanked her. She saw value in those the court ignored. And when my family needed someone trustworthy, Eleanor was the person we trusted. Emily thought of Ruth Carter washing powder from a frightened 12-year-old girl's birthmark. She wondered how many people had known pieces of her story while she had known none of it. Did Eleanor have a daughter? Adrian's silence answered before his voice did. She was expecting a child when she disappeared. Emily felt the floor beneath her shoes and focused on it. Solid oak. Real. Did anyone know the child's name? No. Then this proves nothing. Adrian studied her. You are right. Again, that unexpected restraint. He did not turn possibility into destiny simply because he could. Emily looked down at the ring. Why was this hidden in your wardrobe? Because it was returned to the palace 23 years ago without Eleanor. Emily looked up sharply. Returned by whom? No name. No message. It arrived in a small package 3 days after she vanished. Emily's thoughts collided. The memory showed Eleanor placing the ring inside her blanket. If the ring had later returned to the palace, someone must have found it. Someone who had been near the church. There is something else, Emily whispered. Adrian waited. The church. I know where it is. His expression changed. You said you were found outside a church in Montana. Yes. St. Matthew's, near Cedar Hollow. Adrian became completely still. Emily felt cold despite the sunlight. What? She asked. He crossed to a writing desk, opened a drawer, and removed an old envelope. From it, he unfolded a yellowed road map. His finger moved across Montana and stopped beside a tiny mountain town. Cedar Hollow. Emily stepped closer. A small circle had been drawn around it years ago in faded black ink. Beside the circle was a single handwritten name. Eleanor. Emily looked at Adrian. You already knew. I knew she went there once. When? Adrian's eyes met hers. The week before you were born. Emily stared at the faded circle around Cedar Hollow until the ink blurred. 1 week before she was born. The words should have felt like an answer, but instead they opened a dozen new questions. She lowered the map carefully. Why did Eleanor go there? Adrian remained beside the desk, his expression controlled again, though Emily could now recognize the effort behind that control. I do not know, but someone knew enough to mark it. I did. Emily looked at him. Adrian touched the faded handwriting beside the town. Eleanor sent me a postcard from Cedar Hollow. No explanation. Just the name of the town and one sentence. What sentence? Adrian hesitated. Some truths survive only when nobody knows where they are hidden. A chill moved across Emily's arms. You were 8 when you knew her, but 16 when you started searching. Why wait? Adrian's gaze shifted toward the window. Because when I was 8, Eleanor disappeared from my life and the adults around me told me she had simply left royal service. I believed them. His voice remained even, but Emily heard something beneath it now. Disappointment that had survived years. When I turned 16, I found records that did not match the story I had been given. That was when I began looking. Emily glanced at the photograph, the ring, the map. Pieces of another woman's life had been hidden inside the Alpha King's private rooms while Emily had spent 23 years believing she had begun her own life on a church doorstep. Does anyone else know? She asked. About my search? Marcus knows part of it. About me. Adrian's answer came immediately. No. Relief arrived first. Then suspicion. Why not? Because yesterday you were a palace made with an unusual birthmark. Today you may be connected to a bloodline that disappeared under circumstances neither of us understands. Until we know more, announcing that connection would be careless. Emily studied him. For the kingdom? For you. The simplicity of his answer unsettled her more than ceremony ever could. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Adrian glanced toward the bedroom. The council ended early because Vanessa's father requested a private audience. They will expect me downstairs. Emily placed the map back on the desk. Then I should return to work. She reached for the ceremonial cloak she had left on the chair. Emily. She stopped. Adrian was watching the silver ring still resting in her palm. Leave that here. Her fingers tightened instinctively. A strange disappointment touched her before she could hide it. Of course the ring belonged to him. She opened her hand and stepped toward the drawer. The moment she tried to set it down, heat flashed through the crescent mark beneath her collar. Emily gasped and pulled her hand back. The ring seemed warmer now. Adrian moved 1 step toward her. What happened? The mark. Emily touched her collar. It became hot. When you tried to release the ring? She nodded. Adrian's expression sharpened with thought. Try again. Emily frowned. You want me to hurt myself? No. If it becomes uncomfortable, stop immediately. She appreciated that he said it without hesitation. Emily lowered the ring toward the drawer again. Warmth spread beneath her skin. She stopped. The warmth faded. She lifted the ring. Nothing. Adrian watched carefully. It is responding to distance. That sounds impossible. Yesterday, would you have believed an object could show you a memory? Emily had no answer. Adrian extended his hand, palm upward. May I? She looked at him. then placed the ring into his palm. The instant her fingers released it, a soft pulse seemed to move through the room. Adrian inhaled sharply. Emily felt it too. Not pain, not heat, but recognition. Something quiet and ancient stirring beneath her ribs. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Then voices approached from the corridor. Vanessa, His Majesty returned this way. Emily stepped backward. Immediately, Adrian closed his hand around the ring. The bedroom door opened before either of them reached it. Vanessa appeared at the threshold with Margaret several steps behind her. Her gaze moved from Adrian to Emily, then to the open wardrobe. Silence hardened her elegant features. I apologize, Vanessa said, though she did not sound sorry. I was told you were alone. Emily felt the old instinct rise inside her. Lower your eyes. Make yourself smaller. Disappear. She almost obeyed. Then she remembered Eleanor running through snow with a baby in her arms. Emily straightened instead. Adrian noticed. So did Vanessa. Miss Carter was completing an assignment for me, Adrian said. Vanessa's smile returned, thin and polished. Of course. Her eyes settled on Emily's hand. Royal assignments seemed to require unusual privacy lately. Emily felt the accusation, but Adrian answered before shame could settle. Only when they concern matters that are none of the court's business. Vanessa went quiet. Adrian turned to Emily and held out the ring. Take it. Emily stared at him. Your Majesty? It reacted to you. His voice left no room for misunderstanding. Until we know why, it stays with you. Emily accepted it carefully. Vanessa's face changed. She recognized the ring. Emily saw certainty in her eyes before Vanessa concealed it, and that frightened Emily more than any insult could have. Vanessa knew what the symbol meant. Vanessa's recognition lasted less than a second, but Emily saw it. A tiny pause in her breathing, a tightening around her eyes. Then the polished smile returned as though nothing had happened. What an unusual ring, Vanessa said. Adrian's gaze sharpened. You recognize it? Should I? Her answer came too smoothly. Emily closed her fingers around the silver band. The black stone pressed into her palm, warm but quiet. Vanessa turned toward Margaret. I believe we are keeping His Majesty from the council. Margaret understood the dismissal immediately. Emily, come with me. Emily followed her into the corridor, but before the bedroom door closed, she glanced back. Adrian was still watching Vanessa. This time, the king did not look uncertain. He looked alert. Margaret waited until they were halfway down the servants' staircase before speaking. I have managed this household for 27 years. Emily knew that tone. Yes, ma'am. I have seen 3 royal weddings, 6 treaty ceremonies, 1 renovation that nearly destroyed my patience, and more ambitious guests than I care to remember. Emily kept walking. Yes, ma'am. But I have never seen King Adrian give a palace made a royal heirloom. Emily stopped. You know the ring? Margaret stopped 2 steps below her. I know enough to advise you not to display it. Why? Margaret's expression softened, but only slightly. Because palaces are full of people who become interested in you the moment they believe you possess something they want. Before Emily could ask another question, Margaret continued downstairs. Breakfast service begins in 12 minutes. The conversation was over. Emily slipped the ring into the small pocket inside her apron. For the next 3 hours, she worked beneath the uncomfortable sensation of being watched. Perhaps it was imagination. Perhaps not. Twice, she noticed unfamiliar members of Vanessa's household near the west corridor. Once, while carrying fresh linens, Emily turned and found Vanessa herself standing 30 feet away beside a marble column. She said nothing. She simply smiled and continued in the opposite direction. By noon, Emily's nerves felt stretched thin. She escaped to the servants' courtyard with a cup of coffee and sat beneath an old maple tree. The August air was warm, and somewhere beyond the palace wall a lawn mower hummed steadily. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Emily removed the ring from her pocket. Who are you? She whispered. Nothing happened. No vision. No warmth. Only silver and black stone resting against her palm. I suppose that would have been too easy. Talking to jewelry now? Marcus Reed's voice made her jump. He approached carrying his own coffee. Sorry. You do not look sorry. I am a guard captain. We practice looking unrepentant. Emily almost laughed. Marcus sat on the opposite end of the bench, leaving several feet between them. His gaze dropped to the ring. The humor disappeared. So he gave it to you. You know about it too. I know Adrian has spent years trying to understand it. Emily studied him. Marcus had called the king by his first name. How long have you known him? Since we were boys. Then tell me something he will not. Marcus took a slow drink of coffee. That depends. Why does Eleanor matter so much to him? Marcus looked toward the palace windows. Because she believed him when very few people did. Emily waited. Adrian grew up surrounded by people preparing him to become a king. Marcus continued. Eleanor was one of the few who remembered he was also a child. When he was overwhelmed, she could calm his wolf without making him feel ashamed of it. Emily remembered the strange pressure she had felt in the blue parlor. His wolf. Marcus looked at her carefully. Has Adrian told you what happened yesterday when you served tea? Emily's heartbeat changed. Nothing happened. That is not what I asked. Before she could answer, the ring suddenly warmed. Emily looked down. A pulse of heat moved through the black stone. Then another. Not a vision this time. A direction. She knew that made no sense, yet she felt it pulling her attention toward the eastern side of the palace. Emily. Marcus stood. She barely heard him. Her feet were already moving. She crossed the courtyard, entered through the service door, and followed the strange sensation through two corridors she rarely used. The warmth intensified near an old portrait gallery. At the far end stood a locked oak door. Emily stopped in front of it. The ring was almost hot now. Marcus caught up behind her. This wing has been closed for years. Emily touched the door. The heat vanished instantly. Then a woman's voice whispered inside her memory, soft as falling snow. Find what I left behind. Emily stepped back. Marcus. What? She looked at the locked door. Eleanor was here. Marcus's face lost all color. That is impossible. Why? His eyes remained fixed on the door. Because this was her room. Marcus did not reach for the door. That frightened Emily more than if he had. He simply stood beside her in the silent portrait gallery, staring at the old oak as though 23 years had suddenly collapsed into a few inches of wood. No one has entered this room since Eleanor disappeared, he said. Emily looked at the brass lock. Then how do we get inside? Marcus gave her a careful look. We do not. The ring warmed against her palm. That is not what this seems to think. Emily. Royal secrets have a habit of becoming dangerous without anyone intending them to. I have spent my entire life not knowing where I came from. Her voice remained quiet, but she no longer felt small. I am done walking away because someone else decided I should not ask questions. Marcus studied her for a moment, then exhaled. You sound like him. Who? Adrian. Footsteps approached from behind them. I heard that. Emily turned. Adrian crossed the gallery alone, his council coat unbuttoned, his expression unreadable. Marcus straightened. You finished early. Apparently, that is becoming a habit. Adrian stopped beside Emily and looked at the ring. It led you here. She nodded. I heard Eleanor's voice again. Something tightened in his face. What did she say? Find what I left behind. Adrian looked at the locked room. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then he reached inside his coat and removed a small key. Emily stared at it. You had the key this entire time? Yes. And you never opened the room? Adrian's thumb rested against the worn brass. Once. When I was 16. His voice dropped. I found nothing. Emily looked toward the door. Maybe it was not meant for you. Marcus shifted slightly. Adrian glanced at him. Give us the gallery. Marcus hesitated, then walked toward the far archway. Adrian inserted the key. Before turning it, he looked at Emily. You do not have to do this. She almost laughed at the strange reversal. Yesterday, she had been terrified he might order her to remain inside a closed room. Now the Alpha King was offering her a way out. If I leave now, I will spend another 23 years wondering. Adrian nodded. The lock clicked. He opened the door. Dust floated through a narrow beam of sunlight. The room beyond was smaller than Emily expected. A simple bed stood beneath one window. Books lined. 2 shelves. A faded green sweater remained folded over the back of a chair, as though its owner might return before evening. Emily stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Adrian stayed near the doorway. This was how they left it. Mostly. Emily moved slowly around the room. Nothing reacted. She touched the desk. Cold. A porcelain cup. Nothing. An old book of mountain flowers. Nothing. Doubt began creeping in. Then she reached the window. The ring warmed. Emily stopped. Beneath the window sat a narrow wooden chest. She knelt and touched its lid. Heat moved instantly through the silver band. Here. Adrian came closer. The chest contained blankets, letters tied with ribbon, and several ordinary photographs. Emily searched carefully until her fingers brushed a blue piece of fabric at the bottom. Her breath stopped. She lifted it. A baby blanket, faded with age. The same blue she had seen in the memory. Adrian. He crouched several feet away, keeping space between them. Emily unfolded the blanket. Something small fell onto the rug with a soft metallic sound. A pendant. Crescent moon. 3 narrow lines. Exactly like her birthmark. Emily picked it up. The room vanished. Eleanor stood at the same window, one hand resting over the curve of her stomach. Another woman faced her, older, dressed in formal court clothing. Emily could not see the woman's face. "You cannot hide the child forever," the stranger said. Eleanor's hand tightened protectively. "I only need enough time." "And what happens when Adrian learns?" "He must not know yet." Emily's heart stumbled. Eleanor looked down at the pendant in her hand. "The bond will recognize her before the court does. That is what I am afraid of." The vision broke. Emily found herself back on the floor, gripping the pendant. Adrian was watching her. "What did you see?" Emily could barely form the words. "She was talking about me." "Are you certain?" "She said the bond would recognize me." Adrian went completely still. Emily remembered the blue parlor, his hand tightening around the chair, the strange warmth beneath her ribs whenever his attention found her. Suddenly the mystery felt too close. Too large. She stood. "I need to leave." Adrian immediately moved away from the doorway. "Then leave." Emily reached it, but stopped with her hand on the frame. 23 years of unanswered questions waited behind her. Ahead was the familiar corridor where she could become invisible again. She looked at the open door, then at Adrian. "If I stay, you answer everything you know. Everything. Even if I do not like it. Especially then." Emily stepped back into Eleanor's room. This time, she reached behind herself and closed the door by choice. The quiet click echoed between them. "All right," she said. "Tell me what bond she meant." Adrian did not answer immediately. He crossed to Eleanor's desk and rested his fingertips against the faded wood, as if choosing which truth could safely be spoken first. Emily remained beside the closed door with the crescent pendant in one hand and the silver ring in the other. Both felt warm now. "There are 2 kinds of bonds in our history," Adrian said at last. "The one everyone celebrates is the mate bond. The other is older." Emily watched him carefully. "Older how?" Before pacts had borders and kings had titles, certain Omega bloodlines could recognize people whose lives were meant to intersect with theirs. Not ownership, not obedience. Recognition. Emily looked down at the pendant. "The keepers." Adrian nodded. Eleanor's family believed a true bond could never be commanded. It could only reveal possibility. What happened afterward depended on choice. The words settled inside Emily. Choice. It was unexpectedly comforting. "And your wolf recognized me." Adrian became very still. "Yes." "When?" "Before yesterday." Emily looked up sharply. "How long before yesterday?" For the first time, the Alpha King looked almost uncomfortable. 3 weeks. Emily stared at him. 3 weeks. "You brought documents into the council library. You were there perhaps 30 seconds. She remembered the morning. A stack of territorial reports. Adrian standing beside the fireplace with Marcus. She had placed the papers on a table and left without raising her eyes. "You noticed me then?" "My wolf did." His expression tightened. "I spent the next 3 weeks telling myself it meant nothing." "Why?" Adrian gave a quiet breath that held no humor. "Because kings are surrounded by people eager to interpret every glance as destiny. I have spent years refusing to make permanent decisions based on ceremony, expectation, or instinct alone." Emily thought of Vanessa, the moon selection, the noble families already arranging Adrian's future around him. So when Eleanor said the bond would recognize me before the court did, she may have known what would happen. But why me? That is what we still do not know. Emily appreciated the answer precisely because it was incomplete. He could have made it grander. He could have called her chosen or promised or destined. Instead, he gave her uncertainty, something real. She crossed toward the wooden chest and placed the blue blanket carefully across her knees. A small stitched pattern ran along one corner, nearly invisible beneath years of fading. 3 lines beneath a crescent moon. "This was mine," she whispered. Adrian crouched beside the chest, still leaving several feet between them. The gesture startled her. A king who could summon an entire court with one command lowered himself to the dusty floor because that was where the evidence happened to be. No ceremony. No audience. Emily touched the embroidery. The pendant warmed again, but no vision came. May I see the mark? Adrian asked. Emily's hand rose automatically toward her collar. He noticed her hesitation. You can say no. She studied him. Yesterday, the thought of showing anyone had made her feel 12 years old again, standing behind Ruth's bakery and wishing she could erase the thing that made people stare. Today, she had Eleanor's blanket in her lap. All right. Emily moved the edge of her collar just enough to reveal the pale crescent beneath her left collarbone. Adrian did not touch her. He simply looked. Then his gaze dropped to the pendant. His composure disappeared. What? Emily asked. Adrian reached toward the pendant, then stopped before making contact. Turn it over. She did. Tiny lettering had been engraved across the back. Age had darkened the grooves, but the words remained readable. 2. The last keeper, may truth find you. Emily's throat tightened. Last keeper. Adrian sat back slowly. If this belonged to Eleanor, and she intended it for her child, then your birthmark is not simply a family symbol. What is it? A hereditary seal. Emily almost laughed from disbelief. I clean guest rooms for a living. And yesterday you caught a falling glass before anyone else moved. That does not make me important. No. Adrian's answer came so quickly, she looked at him. Your choices do. Emily remembered Hannah's frightened face. Ruth's warm cloth against her skin. Eleanor running through snow. She looked down at her gray uniform. For years, people had treated it as proof of what she was worth. Adrian was looking at her, as if the uniform told him nothing. A knock sounded at the door. Your Majesty. Marcus's voice. Adrian stood. What is it? Lady Vanessa has requested a formal court session this afternoon. Emily's stomach tightened. Regarding what? Silence lingered outside before Marcus answered. Miss Carter. Adrian's face became cold. Emily rose slowly, still holding the blanket. What has she said? Marcus lowered his voice. That a royal heirloom has been removed from the king's private chambers and placed in the possession of a servant. Emily closed her eyes briefly. The ring. Vanessa had seen everything she needed. Adrian moved toward the door. Emily caught his sleeve before thinking. He stopped and looked at her hand, then at her face. Do not defend me yet, she said. His brow tightened. Emily, if she is accusing me, I want to hear her accusation myself. You do not owe the court an explanation. Maybe not. Emily released his sleeve and straightened the collar over her mark. But I have spent 23 years letting other people decide what my silence means. She placed the pendant around her neck, tucked the ring safely into her pocket, and opened the door herself. Marcus waited outside. Emily stepped into the gallery. Not today. By 3 o'clock, Emily stood outside the royal court chamber wearing the same gray uniform she had put on before sunrise. She had been offered time to change. She refused. If Vanessa wanted the court to judge a maid, then Emily would enter as one. Beyond the double doors came the muted voices of noble families gathering beneath the high vaulted ceiling. Emily could smell polished wood, fresh flowers, and the faint trace of summer rain drifting through an open window somewhere inside. Marcus stood beside her. Adrian waited several feet away, silent beneath the royal crest. You can still refuse this, he said. Emily looked at him. Would Vanessa stop talking if I did? No. Then refusing only means everyone hears her version without hearing mine. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. The doors opened. Conversation faded as Emily entered. Nearly 60 people occupied the chamber. Vanessa stood near the center in a pale blue dress, her father beside her, along with several council members Emily recognized from formal dinners. Margaret waited near the back wall. Hannah stood beside her, looking worried. Emily walked forward. Every step seemed louder than the last. She stopped beneath the carved silver wolf of Blackwood and folded her hands in front of her. Vanessa looked at the plain uniform, then at Emily's face. Miss Carter, she began. This is unfortunate. Emily said nothing. Vanessa continued. A royal heirloom disappeared from His Majesty's private wardrobe yesterday. Shortly afterward, you were seen leaving those chambers. This morning, I personally witnessed that same heirloom in your possession. Murmurs moved through the room. Emily felt the ring in her pocket. That is correct, she said. The murmurs grew louder. Vanessa seemed almost disappointed by the lack of denial. Then you admit taking it? No, I admit possessing it. Those are different statements. Silence returned. Vanessa's father shifted beside her. A servant should remember whom she is addressing. Emily looked at him calmly. I do, sir. That is why I am choosing my words carefully. Somewhere behind her, Marcus cleared his throat in what sounded suspiciously like concealed approval. Vanessa's smile tightened. Then explain how the ring came into your possession. Emily could feel Adrian watching from the raised platform, but he did not interrupt. He was keeping his promise. She reached into her pocket and removed the ring. Blackstone caught the afternoon light. Several older council members reacted immediately. One whispered something Emily could not hear. Vanessa noticed. I found it inside His Majesty's wardrobe yesterday while retrieving his ceremonial cloak, Emily said. I returned it. This morning, His Majesty gave it back to me. The room erupted in whispers. Vanessa turned toward Adrian. You gave it to her? Adrian remained silent. Emily understood why. This was still her answer. He did, she said. Vanessa faced her again. Why would the Alpha King give an Omega Maid an heirloom belonging to the royal household? There it was. Not theft anymore. Worthiness. Emily had heard versions of that question her entire life. Why would anyone choose you? Why would anyone trust you? Why would anything valuable belong in your hands? Her fingers closed around the ring. I do not know everything yet, Emily said. And I will not invent an answer simply because this room wants one today. Vanessa's expression hardened. Convenient. No. Honest. Emily reached beneath her collar and drew out Eleanor's pendant. A collective breath moved through the chamber. An elderly councilwoman stood so quickly her chair scraped across the floor. The keeper's seal. Vanessa went pale. Emily saw it clearly this time. You knew, Emily said. Vanessa's gaze snapped toward her. Excuse me. Yesterday, when you saw the ring, you recognized it. That is absurd. Then why are you afraid of the pendant? Vanessa's composure cracked for half a second. Her father touched her arm. Emily looked from daughter to father and suddenly understood that whatever secret surrounded Eleanor was older than Vanessa herself. My mother was Eleanor, Emily said. The words trembled, but she did not take them back. I cannot prove every part of that statement yet. But I was found 23 years ago outside St. Matthew's Church near Cedar Hollow, Montana. Eleanor traveled there the week before I was born. This pendant was hidden with the blanket she used for her child. And the mark beneath my collar matches its seal. No one whispered now. Emily removed the silver Omega service pin from her uniform and placed it on the council table beside the ring. If anyone believes I entered this palace to steal a title, a ring, or a king's attention, then they misunderstand me. For years ago, I came here because I needed work. I cleaned rooms. I carried trays. I served people who never learned my name. And I did those things with dignity because honest work does not become shameful simply because powerful people refuse to notice it. Margaret lowered her eyes, visibly moved. Hannah covered her mouth. Emily looked directly at Vanessa. If my presence damages the dignity of this court, I will leave today. But I will not apologize for being an Omega. I will not apologize for being a maid. And I will not apologize for asking who my mother was. She turned toward the doors. Emily. Adrian's voice stopped her. She closed her eyes for one heartbeat, then faced him. The Alpha King descended from the platform. He did not look at Vanessa. He did not look at the council. He walked directly to the table, picked up Emily's gray service pin, and held it carefully in his palm. You said the court could decide whether your presence damages its dignity. Adrian raised his eyes to hers. On that point, Miss Carter, you are mistaken. He turned toward the silent room. This court does not decide her worth. The silence after Adrian's words felt different from the silence that had greeted Emily when she entered the chamber. That first silence had measured her. This one measured everyone else. Adrian stood beside the council table with Emily's gray service pin resting in his palm. Miss Carter did not steal the ring, he said. I placed it in her possession myself because it responded to her keeper's seal. Several council members exchanged startled looks. The elderly woman who had recognized the pendant stepped forward. Your Majesty, if the seal is genuine, there are records that can confirm the bloodline. Then retrieve them, Adrian said. Today, Vanessa's father cleared his throat. Surely we should proceed cautiously. A resemblance between symbols does not establish identity. Emily expected Adrian to answer, but he looked at her. Instead, he was leaving space for her voice. I agree, she said. Vanessa blinked. Her father seemed equally surprised. Emily continued, I do not want a history invented for me because it would make a better story for the court. I want the truth, whatever it is. The elderly councilwoman nodded slowly. That is precisely why the keeper records exist. Adrian placed Emily's service pin beside the ring. Until those records are examined, Miss Carter remains under royal protection. No rumor concerning her identity will leave this chamber as an official statement. His gaze traveled across the assembled families. And no member of this household will be punished, reassigned, or dismissed for treating her with ordinary respect. Vanessa drew a careful breath. No one suggested otherwise. Emily looked at her. You suggested I did not belong here. Vanessa's cheeks colored. I questioned unusual circumstances. Then question them, Emily said. But question what happened, not what you think a maid is capable of. The words were quiet. They carried anyway. Adrian's eyes briefly met hers, and something warm moved beneath Emily's ribs. This time she did not fear it. Vanessa's father touched his daughter's elbow. We have heard enough. Not quite. The voice came from the back of the chamber. Margaret Hale stepped forward. In 27 years of palace service, Margaret had perfected the art of appearing invisible whenever noble families wished to believe servants had no opinions. Now she walked directly toward the council table. I supervised Emily Carter for 4 years, she said. She has had access to guest rooms containing jewelry worth more than most homes. Nothing has ever gone missing. She has returned cash left in coat pockets, watches forgotten beside sinks, and once spent 2 hours searching the laundry because a visiting senator misplaced his wedding ring in a bedsheet. A few faces turned toward Emily. Margaret continued, If this hearing concerns character, then character should be entered into the record. Emily's throat tightened. Hannah stepped forward next, nervous but determined. Yesterday, I nearly spilled a tray at dinner. Emily took responsibility because she thought I would lose my job. Emily looked at her. Hannah, it is true. Hannah lifted her chin. She protected me when nobody was watching. The room became very quiet again. Emily understood then that dignity did not arrive when a king announced it. It had been present in small choices all along, unnoticed but real. Adrian turned toward Vanessa. Do you have evidence that Miss Carter stole anything? Vanessa looked at the ring, then at the faces around her. No. Then the accusation is withdrawn. Vanessa hesitated. Yes, Your Majesty. Adrian's voice remained calm. Say it to her. Color rose higher in Vanessa's face. For a moment, Emily expected refusal. Instead, Vanessa faced her. Miss Carter, I withdraw my accusation. Emily nodded. Thank you. She did not demand humiliation in return. She did not need it. The truth had already changed the room. The elderly councilwoman approached the pendant and examined it without touching. There is one more thing, she said. The inscription identifies Emily as the last keeper, but the royal archives may tell us why Eleanor concealed her. Adrian's expression sharpened. How long? Several hours. Begin immediately. The formal session ended soon afterward. Noble families filed from the chamber with none of the careless whispers Emily had heard when she entered. Some looked curious, some uncertain. A few actually lowered their heads politely as they passed her. Emily remained beside the table until only Adrian, Marcus, Margaret, and Hannah were left. She picked up her service pin. I suppose I should return to work. Margaret stared at her. After all of this, you are concerned about your shift? The East guest rooms still need fresh towels. Margaret's mouth twitched. Hannah can handle them. Emily smiled faintly. Yes, ma'am. Margaret and Hannah left together. Marcus followed after receiving a quiet instruction from Adrian. Soon Emily and Adrian were alone in the enormous chamber. He held out the ring. This belongs with you. Emily accepted it. Their fingers did not touch, but the familiar warmth stirred anyway. You did what I asked, she said. You let me speak first. You did. Not need me to speak for you. Emily looked toward the empty chairs. I thought I did. Adrian shook his head. No. You needed someone powerful enough to make certain they listened. Those are not the same thing. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Marcus returned carrying a sealed archival envelope, his expression unusually tense. That was fast, Adrian said. Because the record was already prepared. Marcus handed the envelope to Emily rather than the king. Her name was written across the front in faded ink. Emily Carter. Her breath caught. That is impossible. Marcus looked at Adrian. The archivist says this envelope has been locked in the Keeper collection for 23 years. Emily broke the old wax seal and unfolded a single page. She recognized Eleanor's handwriting from the map notation Adrian had shown her. The first line made her knees feel weak. "My daughter Emily, if you are reading this, then the bond has finally brought you back to Blackwood Palace." Emily looked up at Adrian. Beneath her collar, the crescent mark began to glow with gentle warmth. She lowered her eyes to the next sentence, and everything inside her went still. "Do not let them choose your future for you, not even the king." Emily read Eleanor's warning twice. "Do not let them choose your future for you, not even the king." The words should have made her look at Adrian with suspicion. Instead, she looked at him and found something unexpected in his expression. Relief. "You are not surprised?" she said. "No." Adrian glanced toward the letter. "That sounds exactly like Eleanor." Marcus quietly excused himself, leaving them alone in the court chamber. Afternoon sunlight stretched across the long table where, less than an hour earlier, Emily had been expected to defend her right to stand with dignity. Now her mother's words rested between her hands. She continued reading. Eleanor explained that the Keeper bond was never a command from fate. It was recognition, an opening between two lives that might become something meaningful only if both people freely chose it. She had hidden Emily because powerful families had begun treating Keeper children as political advantages rather than people. Eleanor wanted her daughter to grow beyond the reach of anyone who might decide her value before she could decide it herself. At the bottom was one final sentence. "If the bond brings you home, remember that home is not where destiny places you. Home is where you are free to stay." Emily lowered the letter. For 23 years, she had imagined discovering her past would finally tell her who she was supposed to become. Instead, her mother had left her permission to decide for herself. "What happens now?" Emily asked. Adrian leaned one hand against the table. "Whatever you choose." That is not a very kingly answer. A faint smile touched his face. "I am beginning to suspect you do not need one." Emily almost smiled back. "And the moon selection?" "Postponed." "Because of me?" "Because choosing a Luna while wondering whether my wolf has already recognized someone else would be dishonest to everyone involved." Emily appreciated that he did not turn the statement into a declaration. "No claim, no promise, no demand, only truth." "I need time," she said. "Take it. I might discover I do not want any part of royal life. Then you will not have one. I might leave Blackwood entirely." Something moved behind Adrian's eyes, but his answer remained steady. "Then I will make certain you leave safely." Emily looked at him for a long moment. Power could have made her stay. Instead, he was giving her every possible way to leave. That was when the warmth beneath her ribs returned, softer than before. Several hours later, evening settled over Blackwood Palace. Emily had changed out of her uniform, but kept the gray service pin in her pocket. She walked through the quiet upper corridor, wearing a simple blue dress Margaret had insisted she borrow. Eleanor's letter rested safely in her room. The pendant remained around her neck. The silver ring rested on her finger now, not because anyone had placed it there, but because Emily had chosen to wear it. She stopped outside Adrian's chambers. The door stood open. Inside, Adrian was beside the same wardrobe where their strange journey had begun. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Emily." She entered slowly. The cedar, scent no longer made her nervous. Adrian looked toward the wardrobe and then back at her. "The first time you stood here, you thought I was going to punish you. I thought I was going to lose my job. You also thought I might not let you leave." Emily remembered the quiet click of the door closing and the fear that had rushed through her. For a moment, Adrian walked toward the bedroom door. Then he opened it wider. Cool evening air moved through the corridor beyond. "This time, the door stays open." Emily looked at him. "Why?" "Because Eleanor was right." His voice was quiet. "A bond means nothing if it becomes a cage." Emily's throat tightened. Adrian stepped away from the doorway, leaving the path completely clear. "If you stay at Blackwood, stay as Emily. Not as the last keeper. Not as an Omega the court suddenly finds interesting. Not as someone they expect me to choose." His silver gray eyes held hers. "Stay because you choose to." Emily looked through the open door. She could walk downstairs, collect her belongings, and leave before midnight. She could return to Montana. She could find St. Matthew's Church, search for more pieces of Eleanor's life, and build something far from royal expectations. For the first time, Every direction belonged to her. She took one step toward the doorway. Adrian did not move to stop her. A second step. Still nothing. Emily reached the threshold and paused. Then she smiled. She turned around. I am keeping my job for now. Adrian blinked. Your job? I happen to be very good at it. A quiet laugh escaped him, warm and unexpectedly human. I have been informed. Emily walked back into the room, but stopped several feet away. And I want to learn about the keepers. Of course. And about this bond. Adrian nodded. At your pace. Good. Emily looked once more at the open door. Yesterday, it had frightened her when he closed it. Today, its openness meant something entirely different. Adrian extended his hand, then waited. Emily looked at it. No command lived in the gesture. No court watched them. No ceremony told her what came next. She placed her hand in his because she wanted to. The silver ring warmed gently between them. Somewhere deep within the palace, the evening clock began to chime, and Emily finally understood what her mother had tried to preserve for her. Destiny could open a door. Power could hold it. But love, if it was worthy of the name, would always let her choose whether to walk through. And to everyone who stayed with Emily and Adrian through this journey, thank you for watching. Tell us in the comments what choice you would have made if you were Emily. If you enjoyed their story, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and help us bring you more stories about courage, kindness, dignity, and love.